The honourable member for Red Deer Mountain View.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and certainly the remarkable speech from my colleague from Magantic-Larab. It's a great job that was done there, and certainly I hope that I can live up to the expectations that he had. But I do want to, and I'm honored to be able to speak to Bill C-83, which is the Act to amend Corrections and Conditional Release Act, because located in the centre of my riding is the Bowden Institution, which is presently a medium security prison that was built on an open campus model. It was opened in 1974, having been built on the site of the former RCAF station Bowden, a World War II British Commonwealth Air Training Plan facility. And although it's a minimum security prison, it's recently had a considerable contingent of violent gang members transferred there. Now, during my 34-year career as a teacher in Innisfail, just a few miles north of the pen, and during my wife's 10-year teaching career in Bowden, we both had many interactions with families that had had relatives incarcerated at the penitentiary, as well as interactions with community members that worked as guards, psychologists, or teachers in the institution. And in my role as the Member of Parliament, first for Red Deer from 2008 until 2015, and now for Red Deer Mountain View since 2015, concerns about the activities that take place not just at Bowden, but at correctional facilities across Canada often end up at my desk. Morale of prison staff is so important because in order for them to function in such a way that they can be helpful to both the inmates and themselves, they need safe conditions and positive direction. I'll start with one of the issues that has weighed so heavily on their minds, and that is the disastrous Phoenix pay system. No worker should have to be forced to sell their vehicles, move out of their homes, deal with marriage breakdowns from financial stress, and declare personal bankruptcy simply because the government can't get a properly calculated check to them. But those are things that have happened and are continuing to happen. No worker should have to deal with drug addicts inside the prison, especially when those drugs are fentanyl, where just the breathing of it can be lethal. In July 2017, a corrections officer was hospitalized after finding fentanyl in a car in the parking lot. Drugs are hidden in flower beds, come over the walls in tennis balls, and are brought in by visitors, many under threat of violence to their loved ones if they don't comply. And in November of 2017, $500,000 of drugs, mainly methamphetamines and THC, was seized by staff. So you can imagine how people feel when the concept of needle exchanges and heating spoons also finds their way in, and how that discussion occurs. Simply illustrates to the public just how dangerous and unmanageable the situation is. Corrections staff are not only expected to deal with these dangerous issues, but they have their hands tied, even to the extent of monetary penalty if they take actions against an inmate, even if they are protecting themselves. So as far as this Bill C-83 is concerned, the Union of Correctional Officers, the UCCO-SACC-CSN, intends to spend a lot of time reviewing this legislation. Jason Godin, the national president, says, and I quote, "Bill C-83 will require serious consultation and resources to make it work." Adding that, and again, as correctional officers, we want to make sure that we have the proper tools to ensure staff and inmate safety. And in that sense, Bill C-83 must include structured intervention units, which would operate as a population management tool that they can ensure staff and inmate safety. Consultation and resources, proper tools to make it work. Well, after the way in which this government rolled out its marijuana program, I don't think that there are many people that believe that adequate resources management is, or ever has been, a Liberal priority. The union did go on to say that the bill must not sacrifice disciplinary segregation as a tool to deter violent behavior. So we need alternate sanctions to discipline segregation, ensuring that inmates displaying dangerous and violent behavior have some consequences for their actions. Adding this, since the CSC has limited its use of segregation with new policies, there's been an increased report of assaults on inmates and staff. For example, Godin says, and again I quote, at RPC, the Regional Psychiatric Center, we've had over 100 assaults on staff in 12 months, and that they need to get this under control. So it's my assessment that the introduction of SIUs may pose a risk to both prison guards, inmates, and the inmates in question for whom solitary confinement is used for their own safety. Additionally, the stripping of the ability to use segregation for discipline makes prisons more dangerous for the guards, since they will now be faced with having to deal with the worst of the worst, the most volatile, being out and about from their cells for 4 hours per day. C-83 also goes further than what was raised in either of the Supreme Court decisions by banning administrative segregation and changing it to this SIU model. This is just another example of how misplaced liberal thinking is when it comes to criminals. Give them all the breaks and put the screws to those charged with keeping control. Conservatives will always stand strong by supporting workers' safety and victims' concerns over increasing rights and privileges for criminals. Another aspect of this bill, one that I am in agreement with, is the introduction of body scanners. When you travel as much as we do as members of Parliament, it's just second nature. And what are those scanners designed to do? To keep everyone safe, to restrict dangerous items, to prevent the possibility of mayhem. Now, where could that be more important than in a prison? The union also welcomes the introduction of body scanners to prevent contraband. Quoting again, our union has advocated strongly for the implementation of body scanners, and we are satisfied with the results, end quote. Madam Speaker, I agree that body scanners are a good idea, but we'll be proposing amendments to extend scanning to anyone that enters the institution other than employees. Now, personally, I would go so far as to say that if everyone had to go through the scanners and inmates knew that this was the way that it was going to be, then the recognition that nothing could come in would go a long ways to ensure safety for all. Well, one of the things that I've been acutely aware of as a resident of central Alberta is the issue of criminality. Yes, we have a penitentiary, but we also have criminals from all over this country. And I've heard from other members that there are issues regarding special circumstances of Indigenous inmates, concerns about inmates from ethnic or religious minorities, all issues that need to be carefully addressed. There's also issues with people that have drug addictions, that feed their habit through criminal behavior. And those special cases where the inmates with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder are engaging in criminal activity because they are manipulated by con artists, some within the institutions as well. And circumstances where effective mental health protocols and interventions need to be used. The formalization of exceptions for offenders with mental health conditions of special circumstances, when done properly, would truly be fair. As a matter of fact, our previous Conservative government championed the improvement of mental health treatment for patients by ensuring faster mental health screening through the creation of mental health strategies for prisoners, by extending mental psychological counseling, and by improving staff training. This was not hard on criminals. It was compassionate and effective. Granted, much more work still needs to be done. But just throwing up our hands like the Liberals are doing, hoping that they can move criminals out of the prison faster by simply reclassifying them, doesn't make sense, and it surely doesn't protect the public. Policies such as classifying a single prison cell in a minimum security to become a maximum security cell sounds more like an administrative solution than a strong security decision. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, we want to see the risk to prison guards, the institution staff, and the general public completely eliminated. Isolating offenders that attack other inmates are a harm to themselves, and others should not always be second-guessed. Making prisons drug-free by the use of technology and strict enforcement shouldn't be considered an impossible task, and ensuring that the right mental health treatment gets to the right inmates as quickly as possible should be the goal of everyone involved. Hopefully, those witnesses that are clamoring to make the Liberals see the light will get a fair hearing when this goes to committee, and amendments will be accepted to make this legislation effective. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments?